Welcome to Leadership Rediscovered. I'm your host, Laura Siebold, and today I am thrilled to be joined by my very good friend, Ed Wallace. Ed consults with and speaks for corporations and associations across the globe with a client list that is a who's who of Fortune 500 companies. He is the author of Fairs to Friends, which I brought with me, Creating Relational Capital, Business Relationships That Last, and his most recent #1 bestseller, The Relationship Engine. Ed was recently published in the Harvard Business Review. In addition, he is currently on the Executive Education faculty of Drexel's Lebeau College of Business and Villanova's University's Human Resources Master's Program. Ed, welcome to Leadership Rediscovered.
It's great to see you, Laura, and great to be with you on Leadership Rediscovered. And it's so great to see your journey from corporate executive to now an amazing executive coach. The fact that our businesses get to collaborate on some things together.
So fun.
And,
yeah.
And I just, I'm honored to be on your program.
Well, thank you. I'm honored to have you here, and I'm very fortunate that our paths crossed in a different time in my career. So this is proof that these relationships can last beyond just your place of work or wherever you are along your journey. So I just am excited to get going and introduce you to people that may not know you, although you are very famous. But for maybe those people living under a rock that don't know about you, we'll get you out in today. Speaking of rocks, did I read on your LinkedIn profile that you once opened for the Rolling Stones?
Oh, now you're going down a path that, so should I share the story?
Share the story, yeah.
So I was giving a keynote speech for one of my association customers at the Bellagio in Las Vegas. And I brought my wife, Laurie, with me. Yeah. Similar names, right?
Yeah.
and she was in the casino playing blackjack. And we were there for like 3 or 4 days. I was working like 90 minutes. So it was a great chance to get away.
Nice.
And just reconnect and everything. So anyway, I go to get my mic tested and all that stuff about an hour before my talk. And my talk was from 3 to 4 in the afternoon. So the fellow who hired me comes up to me and he says, "Hey," he goes, "I have good news and bad news." I said, "Okay, well, you already paid me. So what could the bad news be?" Right.
Right.
He said, no. He goes, "You're going to be interrupted near the end of your talk. That's the bad news." I said, "Okay, I can handle that. What's the good news?" He goes, "It's the Rolling Stones."
No.
I said, "The Rolling Stones?" He said, "The Rolling Stones are going to be on the other side of the ballroom wall. Your back is going to be to Mick Jagger."
No.
And I said, "Well, that's not bad news. That's great news." He said, "But it's going to get noisy right as you're doing your big close to your keynote." I said, "I think I can handle this."
Yeah.
He said, "Get your wife down here." I said, "Okay." So I text her. I go, "Laurie, the Rolling Stones are going to be right behind me. Come on down." She goes, "No way." I go, "Way." So she comes down around, she gets there around 15 minutes before I'm supposed to be finished because, she couldn't leave the blackjack tables too soon. And sure enough, there's no Rolling Stones. And I finished my talk to thunderous applause.
Of course.
And then I typically do a book signing. Now, Laurie, my wife, she has to stay and meet all these suits because she's strapped. And that's the last thing she wants to do.
She's real disappointed. I thought I was going to see the Rolling Stones. Now I got to just sit here and meet and greet.
Right. And she's heard all the same stuff over. "Oh, your talk was so good." She's like, "Give me a break," right?
You should see how I load the dishwasher.
He takes the trash out at home, right?
Yeah.
So I finished the last book, and now everybody's gone. And it's just Laurie and me. Even the man who hired me is gone. And, she's not too happy. Yeah. And the song "Tumbling Dice" comes through the walls. Just like you're right there. There's no, that music, there's no barrier, right?
Right.
And then you hear them talking to each other. They were doing a rehearsal for a tour they were starting. And they just so happened to be rehearsing at the Bellagio at that moment. Then they played another song, and then my wife is getting re-impressed with her husband, right? She's
right.
This is what you do when you go out here.
Exactly.
And then another song, and then finally they're finished. So we're walking out together. She goes, you should put it on your website. I go, "What?" "You should put you open for the Rolling Stones."
For sure.
So
you did.
That's where that came from.
You did. And
So
I would totally have tried to see if it was one of those removable walls, that sometimes they
it,
put up in the ballroom, like, whoops, pulled
it,
the
it was, but
separator.
there were security guards everywhere. Yeah, they were everywhere.
Oh my gosh, I love it. All
Yeah.
right. So
So,
thank you. I had to ask that question, but
sure.
I do want to dive into your story beyond opening for the Rolling Stones, especially because I know this one book that I brought with me, one of your 4 books, Fairs to Friends, it tells the story of Max. And I would just love for you to take us on your journey and introduce us to Max and everything that you've been a part of up to this point in your career.
Sure. Well, first of all, that book is the original. I call it the comic book version
Yeah.
of everything we've created a business around. But it's a collector's item, at least for you, Laura. I'm glad
Yes,
you
I
think it is.
treasure it. I
But
treasure it.
we even have an interesting kind of fold the way they did the cover. And I think I have 4 or 5 left. So you have one of the
Mm-hmm.
very last remaining Fairs to Friends that are not just a regular paperback. But that
I
book
love
got
it.
us started back in 2006. But I'll take you back all the way to like 1991.
Yeah.
And I'm a CPA, and you've heard this joke before, but I'll tell it for your audience. I'm in recovery, and part of that recovery, at least you laugh.
Yeah.
I used that joke in Michigan yesterday, and nobody laughed, right?
Was it a room of
And
CPAs?
they're all salespeople. No, I said
Oh,
I'm a
okay.
CPA in recovery, right? And I said, okay, I'm here all week, folks. Try the veal, right? Like it's like a bad lounge act. Anyway, um, so I was in accounting, and I it really wasn't a good fit, as you could probably tell.
Hmm.
And I took a position in sales, and the company I worked for gave me a sales territory in the Midwest, and I live in the Northeast in the Philly area.
Yeah.
So, I would take a taxi to get into my territory,
Hmm.
Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, etc. And I would leave at 5 a.m. because our infant son Brett had just started sleeping through the night with Laurie. And I didn't want to interrupt that because it caused problems for everybody, including the guy who was to make a flight, right?
Right.
Typical Tuesday morning, I'm taking a company called the Bennett Cab Service at the time. And the Bennett cabs are big white cars. They're kind of dinged up. Uh, I get distracted. The screen door's open. It's a summer day, and the driver comes in. He rings the bell,
Mm.
and I kind of sprinted to the door. I asked him. I kind of nodded, "Don't ring again." He took my bag, started rolling it towards the taxi. Nobody made it. No one was moving around upstairs, so I just gently closed the door. I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah.
Anything
Made
else
it.
that happens in there is not my fault, right?
I am no longer here.
So, and I brought an example with me here. So, and I know you've seen one of these before, but the guy showed up in a London taxi, which,
Yeah.
had never happened in my lifetime at that point in our driveway in the Philadelphia suburbs. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And he's holding the door open for me, and I kind of rubbing my eyes like, this is a London taxi. And he came around, he got in, and I noticed how clean the car was, beautiful leather seats, no noise, little water bottle on the seat. Maybe this guy was a precursor to Uber, I don't know.
Hmm.
Um, and he turned and introduced himself. He reached his hand across the seat and said, "Good morning, Ed. My name is Max. How you doing today?" And that handshake literally has me here with you today,
Wow.
um, because Max turned into this mentor for me. The London taxi was great and all that, but he taught me how to be competitor proof in a world that's commoditized.
Hmm.
And it gets to, like, your whole platform on leadership. It gets to what kind of experience, like, our success is through the experience we create for others.
Yes.
And Max in this taxi, it was a ride like none other, but the car itself, but the journey and the way he engaged with people and the
Hmm.
way he asked questions to salespeople that were different than maybe that he asked to moms,
Hmm.
uh, that he asked to grandparents, that he asked to executives.
Hmm.
He targeted his conversation, I like to say. We actually have a training program called Targeted Conversations with Max right now.
I
It's
love it.
it just lives on. And the whole point was, and I know this is a concept that you really liked when we first met each other
Yeah.
years ago, was it's called relational GPS.
Yes.
And it's such a simple concept because I'm not a complicated person, as you know, Laura. Uh, we all have goals,
Mm-hmm.
we all have passions, we all have struggles.
Mm-hmm.
And the sooner we can locate that with that person, it could be a business or a personal goal. It could be a personal passion or a business passion. Maybe their career, they're real passionate about helping people or whatever. And what human being doesn't have struggles?
Right.
And the sooner we locate GPS, the relationship generally has to move forward. And Max made every interaction about the people in his taxi. And
Mm.
that was probably one of the greatest attributes I took from all those years I rode with him. How do you make it about the other person? How do you
Mm-hmm.
locate their GPS and then work your common goals into that? So
Yes.
there's a little taste of Max for you.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you for sharing that because I just remember that story really sat with me. And if I recall correctly, you would ask questions like, what kind of taxi ride are you giving people? Or what's that experience when people engage with you? And I don't think that's something that we always think about in terms of when I'm having a conversation or even when I'm in a meeting or whatever
Mhm.
I'm doing, what is that other person's experience with me? And you're right. A lot of times, if you're in a service business or you're selling a product or anything that has some level of competition, it's all about how do you set yourself apart? How do you differentiate? Why should you buy my product over my competitor's product when maybe they're ultimately pretty similar in nature? And that experience that you create is so pivotal. And I know a lot of times you use this you have an amazing training program that you deliver all over the country, the world, about relational capital, et cetera. And I know in some circumstances it's maybe delivered for salespeople directly or other individuals within a company. But to me, there's a huge leadership application there in
Mhm.
terms of what types of relationships are you having with everyone on your team. And I think sometimes when I use the word relationship in a business setting, people get a little like,
Right.
are we going to have to talk about feelings? Because I don't want to have to talk about feelings, or I don't want to have to get too personal with my staff. What if they tell me something that I don't want to know or I can't handle? But I'd like to hear from you, your perspective on the importance of valuing relationships, especially from a person who's leading other people, and what type of impact it has when you do have positive relationships. And then, of course, if they're not as strong as they could be.
Sure. It's interesting because we started off naturally with doing sales
Mm-hmm.
development, sales professional development around relationship development because no one was really doing it. And it was
Mm-hmm.
the only thing I was actually good at, right? Uh,
You're good at
so,
more than that,
no,
Ed.
so that worked beautifully for us. And my original vision for the business, though, was that it would be a leadership development business. And we
Mm,
started the business at a crazy time around 2006 and then 2008 created a lot of problems with the economy. The only budgets that were out there were sales training budgets.
yes.
So we pivoted away from leadership
Mm,
and we wrote a book called Business Relationships That Last.
mm-hmm.
And that became the pivotal program that got us into companies like Dow Chemical. And we became part of their curriculum for training their account managers and all that great stuff happened. But during that time, about 25% of the companies that hired us wanted us to adapt that content for leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So I started thinking, okay, well, how about relational leadership as the
Yes.
platform to transition from, relational capitalists, right? That's what we called
Mm-hmm.
salespeople, right? And I took a step back at that point, Laura, and I thought about, okay, what's a relationship? Like I never actually looked up what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And it is such a simple definition that it was kind of jarring for me because it's two people coming together around something in common.
Hmm.
That's all it is. I'm thinking
Wow.
it's complicated and
Right.
right. It's just you and I are coming together to support your podcast today.
Yes.
We have a relationship already, but let's say you didn't know me
Yeah.
and somebody said, hey, you should meet Ed Wallace or Ed, you should meet Lauren. we would
Yeah.
have a whole different level of conversation on this podcast that we're probably
Right.
having right now. We'd be kind of getting to know each other through the podcast, whereas we've got this higher level relationship already.
Yeah.
So a publisher approached me, HarperCollins, and they said, we really think your sales relationship stuff really could apply to leaders in general.
Hmm.
And I didn't want to write another book at the time. We were doing really well with our business, and writing a book, if you do it yourself, which I always wanted to do that, I wanted to create and own our content and
Mm.
share it as if we were the originators of it. It takes about 1,200 hours,
Yeah.
and that's a half a work year for some people.
It's a lot
So
of time.
right, and I was already kind of you know creating friction at home at being up in bed typing at 3 a.m, and here I come
Yeah.
with another one right after. And again, I kind of say that jokingly, but it does put a lot of stress on your time and everything else. It's like having the term paper that's perpetually due. Right?
Oh
Like
gosh, you're giving
always
me
due.
flashbacks.
Right? It's always due. So excuse me.
Hmm.
So I pushed back on the publisher, and they said, no, we really think it's going to be a great book, and they just like to put content out there. So I said, okay, what's my book about?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah. You tell me. You want me to write this book
what do
so
you want me to
bad.
write? They said thoughtfulness, and I'm like
Thoughtfulness?
thoughtfulness,
Huh.
and I went, oh, I think you got me hooked on that. This was in like 2015 when things were so incredibly swinging digitally,
Hmm.
like really severely digitally before the pandemic and everything. And people were losing their way internally with their business relationships.
Hmm.
And people would just assume, text or email the person in the workstation of the office next door than just driving by or walking by. So anyway, the main platform for on the book is a principle we call worthy intent. And
Mm.
it's about 5 principles of relational leadership. The first and foundational principle is displaying worthy intent. And worthy intent is about having good intentions towards each other. But if I don't see behavior coming back from you, Laura, that displays my worthy intentions, I could just be like a monk in a monastery somewhere, right?
Right.
Or some spiritual person that's in Nepal. Unless they can see the results of their good intentions, yeah, they got to
Mm.
just have faith and belief. But a business leader who is about marshaling people around a common goal,
Hmm.
they can see behavior. They can see, when our meetings get extended, people stay and they're still enthusiastic.
Hmm.
There's great dialogue after our meetings. Confidence gets shared in our meetings, and on and on and on. So we wrote the relationship engine, and it did really well. Thank you for plugging that for us. And we
It's a
turned that
great
into
book.
thank you. We turned that into leadership programs. I think we did one for one of your groups in your company
Yeah.
before you started Shine. Shine.
Yeah.
It's Shine Consulting or Shine Coaching? I forget.
Shine Consulting, but I
I,
do coaching.
yes, you do
Yeah,
both. You
I
do
do
both.
both. Yes.
And I still remember when you said, I think I might want to leave my job.
And you were like, you're crazy.
And I'm like, well, I don't think I thought you were crazy. I thought that was me 18 years ago, and
Yeah.
my CEO saying you're crazy, and I wasn't going to do that, but I was going to
Hmm.
make sure that you knew what you were facing.
Yeah. Do you understand what? Yeah. This is not as easy as it may look and glamorous as it may look on the
Right.
surface.
So we started a category of relationship that we call relational leadership.
Yeah.
And it's based on these 5 principles: displaying worthy intent, locating or caring about people's goals, passions, and struggles. So there's
Hmm.
GPS again. Making every interaction matter. And believe it or not, that principle is about the way you conduct meetings,
Ah.
because we are so ineffective. We collectively, the world, the business world, not you,
Yes.
Laura, not you, no.
No, my meetings are
But
great.
your meetings are
Everybody
awesome.
else.
Yes. But we tend to lose up to 5 days per month in the meeting because of the meetings we attend. So if you're a leader and your
Hmm.
team is meeting without some kind of guidance from you or some kind of structure around that meeting, think about all the productivity, factor that over a large company. And I've never walked
Mhm.
into a company that claims they love their meetings.
No, but they
But
have them. There's so many of them.
we don't practice them though. That's the problem. Like we don't
Yeah.
like athletes practice stuff, right? But we don't
Yes.
practice meetings, and that's the business we're in. It's almost
Right.
so we actually talk about making every interaction matter as the third principle, and we provide some tools in there. And the one tool is called POP. It's the purpose, outcome, and process for your meeting. And the most important of the three letters in the acronym is the purpose.
Mm-hmm.
What are we trying to do in this meeting? And
Mm-hmm.
why will the people coming to the meeting benefit, not me as the meeting leader or the
Yes.
manager, director, VP, whatever I am? So relational leaders recognize that everybody only has 168 hours in a week. And
Mm-hmm.
how do I create an environment of meetings, which is what we're in the business to do, that really people actually want to come to our meetings? Maybe the meeting doesn't run as long. Maybe we get done
Yeah.
early. Maybe we start on a different time than on all kinds of different things in there on that principle. Because Max, the cab driver, made every single interaction matter. He was
Mm.
completely in the moment. And so when we're thinking, we're trying to translate the Max concepts, like, well, meetings,
Yes.
everybody thinks meetings aren't any good. So that's the third principle. The fourth principle is value people before processes. And if you
Mm.
think about our cable television companies,
Mm-hmm.
they're an example of valuing process before people. But if you think about Chick-fil-A, that's an example of valuing people before process.
Yeah.
So we talk about how leaders who are designing processes, they should consider, you notice I said they don't need to, Laura, because
Mm-hmm.
even my kids as they were growing up didn't want to know you need to.
No,
Um,
yeah. Just a suggestion,
yeah,
something to think about.
would you consider?
Yes.
um, that's all about the processes we design as leaders. And then my favorite principle of the five is connecting performance to a purpose.
Mm.
And how do we take this project management review meeting, right? Or
Yes.
right this corporate cog that we're stuck in, and how do
Mm-hmm.
we make this connected to some higher thing? And
Mm-hmm.
I talk about two ideas. I reflect on two ideas when we think about that. The first is, um, John F. Kennedy, when he was president, before he was the big problem happened in the 60s. He was touring NASA,
Mm-hmm.
and he wasn't very happy with the way the NASA executives were embracing his challenge to be the first country to put a man on the moon. And it was almost going to be embarrassing if the Russian competitors beat the United States to the moon, because they were already ahead of the United States because they put somebody in space before we did. So anyway,
Yeah.
so Kennedy's touring NASA, and he's not really happy,
Not in a good mood at
not in a
that.
good mood. He runs into a maintenance person. Let's just pretend his name is Charlie. And of course, he introduced himself. Hi, I'm Jack Kennedy. That was the way he went about things. It's Sam President Kennedy. Mr. President, it's so nice to meet you. And Charlie, what are you doing? And Charlie's holding a mop, literally holding a mop. Dead straight face, no smile. He goes, "Sir, I'm putting a man on the moon."
I love that.
Now Kennedy is taken aback, and because he's a janitor. I mean, that's
Right.
a terrible description, but that's Kennedy was back then. That was the perception.
Right.
So, Charlie, what do you mean? He goes, "Well, the number one thing I do around is keep everything clean
Mm-hmm.
and tests." And he went on to explain how if the environment isn't clean, everything bogs down.
Yes.
That inspired me for this principle. And then the other part that I try to challenge folks with is, write down the year you were born and put a dash after it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's going to be four more numbers someday.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you doing with that dash?
Mm-hmm.
And how are you, and so I go through a series of questions. What's most important to you? What are you here for? And what's really interesting, I could have 40, 50, or 10 or 100 people in a room. Rarely does anyone want to say financial security. It's
Although if
always
you ask, people always say, "Oh, everyone's motivated by money or more money at an
right.
organization."
And rarely I get financial security. It's more, I want to make sure my family doesn't get
Yes.
out of balance with my work life, or I want to make
Yeah.
sure that I took care of this sick relative, or I want to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that I was a great mom, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. But never, it's like, I want to make millions of dollars so I can take care of my great grandkids down the road. No one ever,
Right.
even the rich people in the room, because I work with a
Yeah.
lot of business, they don't say that.
No.
And they've got jets.
Right. So they could say that.
So to your original question, which was 10 minutes ago, those are the five principles that we came up with
Yeah.
that apply to a relational leader. And a relational leader is someone who continually reinforces the impact of relationship capital in everything they're going through in
Mm-hmm.
their daily work, whether it be on their professional side or their personal side.
Yeah.
And
No, and
anybody
I
can be a
appreciate.
relational leader. That was my
Yeah.
anybody can
Yeah.
be one. You don't have to be the director of something. You can be the maintenance person, and you're
Yeah,
relational.
absolutely.
Excuse me.
Well, and I think I'd like for you to dive just a little bit deeper into the people before process because it makes me think about I do have a lot of clients that are in very regulated type industries and those oftentimes are very process driven organizations. And so I think the concept of putting people before process might seem a little bit counter to how they're wired. It's well, we need everyone to fit into this box. We need everyone to follow these processes or we're going to get shut down or this disastrous thing is going to happen. And so I'd love to hear your perspective on how you create that balance and why it matters. Why put people before process?
You're probably going to hang on to people longer if you do. um,
Right?
that, but well, no, I can draw a couple of parallels to that question. One is the airline industry is extremely regulated,
Mhm.
and there's all kinds of travel regulations, there's all kinds of safety regulations, there's all kinds of financial regulations, there's all kinds of you get so many routes. Yet if you think about Southwest Airlines,
Mhm.
uh, they tend to, first of all, their logo is a heart with wings.
Yes.
I don't know if they've missed a dividend in all the years they've been in business. They might have missed one.
Mhm.
I don't. They
Mhm.
were embarrassed during 9/11 at their profits.
Yeah.
And if you think about a business that puts people first, you've got happy flight attendants, you got pilots, singing happy
Yes.
birthday to people from the cockpit.
Yes.
They
It's a totally
figured
different experience.
out we don't want to block the aisle with the beverage cart
Mhm.
because the beverage cart prevents people from going to the restroom.
Right.
Um, they figured out you stagger the aisles so that two people can get out at the same time.
Mm.
So there's a highly regulated space. I can navigate the website, Laura. Now that's a
Mhm.
big deal. If I can navigate the website and
Yeah.
cash in points and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So they've taken this regulated box
Yeah.
and their airport's called Love Field. I mean, for crying
Mhm.
out
Oh,
loud.
you're right.
But
Their ticker symbol is LUV, I
it is
believe. Yes.
exactly. So I think it like my friend Tom Feeney, who just retired as the CEO of Safe Light Auto Glass, in his job descriptions, they've got the term caring hearts.
Wow.
In a big corporation, job
Mhm.
descriptions. So I tested this out once. I had a safe light repair, safe light replace.
Yes.
Right? So I had a little ding in my windshield one day, and there's a safe light in a two towns down from us. So I went online, made my appointment,
Mhm.
showed up later that afternoon, and I met this gentleman behind the counter who was the service guy. Really, really, really pleasant. I said, "Got a question for you." I said, Tom Feeney goes, yeah, our CEO. I said, I'm friendly with him. I said, what's the culture like here? He says, let me tell you what the
Mhm.
culture's like here. On my 30th work anniversary, he called me on Saturday morning.
Wow.
This is a service tech. They have thousands.
Right.
And Tom called him that exact day.
Wow.
Thank him for working for the company for 30 years. So, and again, a highly process. I think we overplay processes.
Mm-hmm.
I think we sometimes use processes as a way to neuter humans.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, um, each human can interact within that rigid process. I had a problem with my bank once, and it was a Saturday, and you're going through. This is before online, right? You're going through all
Right.
these calls, right? And I was ready to really like tear into the next person who got on, asked for my social, asked for my password and my address. The all this guy
Mm-hmm.
gets on. He's and I'll never forget. He goes, "Hi, this is Philip. How can I make you smile today?" And I went, "I was just about to rip you, Philip."
Yeah. Thank
So,
goodness you opened with that.
so even within a process that was not designed, we can make a difference in that process if we just
Yes.
kind of think about the person on the other end of it.
Well, and you brought up something that I think you're right. If we over engineer or we go so heavy with the processes that we
Mhm.
actually take away people's ability to think creatively sometimes and add the contributions that they could. It clips their ability a little bit in terms of what they can offer up. I am fascinated that you brought Southwest up because I'm a big fan of Southwest and I choose to fly them because of their culture and because of the experience that I have on their planes. And then, they had a little bit of a crisis in the wintertime or around the holidays, and there was a letter that was floating around. I don't know if it's real or not. It was on social media, but supposedly written by a pilot there that basically talked about, let me explain to you what caused this to happen. And my assessment of it was they maybe did focus a little bit more for a time period on process over
Sure.
people, and
Yep.
it definitely seems like it had a negative impact for them, I will say. I know we're zooming along here. I would love to hear from you just a deeper dive real quick into relational GPS, and because that was another thing that I learned from you that was mind-blowing to me. I'm someone who does value relationships very highly. I like to think that I try to establish good relationships, and I remember when you first introduced the concept of the relational GPS, and I think the question was, if you think about a circle maybe around you in terms of your boss, your peers, your direct reports, do you know their GPS? And I was like, yeah, I know all these people really well. Some of them are even good friends of mine. But then when I started to dive a little deeper into it, I realized I actually couldn't answer that
Mhm.
question for each one of those people. So could you just share a little bit more about that?
Sure. I appreciate that one, Laura, because it is like a go-to
Yeah.
and it's so simple. So we talked earlier about everyone in business and in life probably has some business and personal goals. They have things they care about, passions, and they have struggles, business and personal.
Hmm.
And almost anything that you could share with me, uh, we talk about your son and his baseball and everything. I know
Hmm.
how passionate you are about that, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Almost anything another person can share with the other person is a goal, passion, or struggle. So, how do we remember things about people? That's
Yeah.
one of the big challenges of business. We have too many relationships, so I'm not going to focus on any of them. I'm just going to be
Yes.
in the moment. But if we were engaged with a prospect, a customer, someone who reports to us, and they mention something about their family, well, it might be a passion. I literally say, write GPS down on a little notepad, and
Hmm.
as they speak, you're going to see how it all kind of flow. Almost anything they say is going to flow into one of those three things. And
Yeah.
are there things you can do to help them with that? And the best way to do that is not to solve their problem. Like Max never solved my problems.
Hmm.
He just asked me questions that provoked me to think and self-discover. And a relational leader, see how great I tie this in?
I love it. I love it.
No, a relational
Ed is
leader
the master.
helps the people they're working with self-discover
Yeah.
what the solutions are, because there's no way you can lead. In the book I talk about, the old leading from above doesn't work.
Hmm.
I was in this program yesterday, and the owner of the business, who is incredibly successful, And he literally sat in breakouts with his sales team and his leadership team and did exercises
That's
that I
wonderful.
assigned. And as I went and saw his team, he was grinding away at those just like a brand new salesperson, just like a new hire in their HR department. It was,
Oh,
I
very
wish I could have
cool.
filmed this guy. He was such a relational leader. And then afterwards, he and I are talking. His name is Al. We're talking, and I said, you know, I said, how'd that go? He goes, well, at first they're a little like, oh, we got to listen to Al.
Yeah.
And then when I said, hey, I don't know, all of a sudden the creative stuff started happening. So
Hmm.
great example of a relational leader. And what I challenge your audience to think about is the number one thing that we find that people in business don't know is their boss's personal goals.
Mm.
We know what he or she wants when it comes to the outcomes or the business, whatever that is that we were aligned with. But when it comes to what he or she is trying to like, I wonder if Ed's thinking about moving to another company, or I wonder if he sees that
Yeah.
posted position over there. And when that leader or that hierarchical leader actually starts sharing those kind of things, like, hey, what would you think if I transferred over there? You built a great relationship. So
Yes.
locate GPS. And like you mentioned, once you have to actually write it down, it's a little harder than saying, I know this. And I'll tell one more quick cab driver thing, and then I know you want to move to another topic, but
Yeah.
I'm in another time. I'm in an Uber 4 or 5 years ago in Chicago. Max was a long time ago. Grandmother's driving the Uber, and she starts talking about people. She's just a real pleasant person. She had to
Hmm.
be close to 80 years old, driving Uber so she can buy her kids, grandkids, Christmas presents, things like that. And we start talking about people, and she has no idea what I do. Right? And she said this, Ed, you can't judge a book by its cover until you read the story. I'm like, oh my
Mm.
gosh. Like that's
Yes.
GPS. That's the story.
Yes. Yes, and
So
it's so important because again, it really caused me to take a step back and think about, do I truly know the goals, passions and struggles of every person that reports to me, of the
mm,
peers that I work with day to day, and for my boss, you're right. And
yep,
someone who I knew very well but thought, "You know what? I actually don't know." If you
right.
can't answer one or more of those, can you give us some introductory questions to ask? It might feel awkward to be like, I'm curious what your struggles are right now or what you're dealing with. Do you have a suggestion for that?
I have one kind of practical yet a little awkward suggestion, and I have one regular suggestion. So I'll give you the first one. The first one is, hey Laura, you're my boss, let's say.
Yes.
I just went through this incredible workshop by this guy, Ed Wallace. No, just kidding. I just went through this program by this guy, Ed Wallace, and he came up with this concept called relational GPS. And he talked about it, and I would explain it to you.
Yeah.
And I realized that you're one of the most important relationships in what I do here, and I don't know your relational
Oh,
GPS.
perfect. Yeah.
And just come out and say it, right? So that's
Yeah.
one way.
So
And
I
you
was
got to
just
be kind of,
listening to this great podcast where they talked about relational GPS. That can be your
led by
question, right?
the Shine Consulting CEO. So,
Yes.
so that's one way. The other way is just make time to ask them questions,
Mm.
right? Like just make time. When you're with when you're with someone who hierarchically reports to you, report to someone or their peers with you, you just spend a little more time with them and say, maybe you're talking about a project and pivot to, Laura, I see you every day, and I never
Yeah.
really asked you about your family, and I really feel funny that I haven't done that, or I
Mhm.
really feel funny that I see you drive this kind of car. Why that kind of car? Maybe it's an interesting kind of car or something.
Mhm.
Max was great at asking questions, and
Yes.
that's how he established his relationships and his credibility.
I love that. Thank you. Can I just ask one more question real quick and then we'll do our lightning round?
Sure,
Real quick. Okay. Just
take your time.
because of the importance of relationships, I think
Mhm.
about, especially now that we're in a more hybrid or remote
Mhm.
world, do you have any tips or suggestions for how people can go about building relationships, just like what we're doing right now through Zoom, where we're not face to face with
Mhm.
someone else? Any thoughts on how to build relationships in that digital setting?
So my relationship with Max over 4 or 5 years was the back of his head, his right hand, and his eyes in the rearview mirror.
True.
Almost a virtual relationship when you really think
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
So our taxi cab extends to these rectangles that we're in. You mentioned the taxi cab ride. The ride we take
Mm-hmm.
people on extends to the way we run Zooms, the
Mm-hmm.
way we do Teams, whatever tool we're using for these meetings. And there's all kinds of approaches you can do. You can have a structured meeting. And I talked about meetings as the third principle, make every
Yeah.
interaction matter, where the first 10 minutes is like we're gonna do a lightning round here. It's a little relational capital building lightning round. Hey, everybody, chat in something that you found interesting about this movie, or chat in something about the game last night, or chat in something that was interesting. And you can be the conductor of a
Yeah.
great Zoom meeting, and that warmth comes through. We talk about warmth and competence in the in the relationship engine book, and
Mm-hmm.
we should always, according to the experts, not Ed Wallace, the people at Princeton, right, should always lead with warmth, because we're
Mm-hmm.
going to have a competent meeting, because that's what we're on there to do. But how do we
Yes.
create some warmth around that meeting? And again, it extends to virtual. We talk about a hybrid relational ladder, and everybody's good at doing Zooms now. But how do we get 1% better at that Zoom every time we turn it on with somebody?
Yes, fantastic. Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. Okay,
You're,
I won't pepper you with any more questions other than to do the lightning round, because we do like to end on a
okay.
fun note. Okay.
All
So
right.
this is 1 minute to answer as many open-ended questions as you can about you. On your mark, get set, go. What season best fits your personality?
Oh, so the fall.
Fall. Okay. What's your most used emoji in text?
Uh, the smiley. I know it's terrible. The smiley,
That's okay.
or the Philadelphia Eagles bird during the Eagles football season.
I know. I'm sad they didn't win. What book, song, movie, or podcast has had the greatest impact on your life?
Oh my
You
gosh.
stumped him.
Probably that little book called I can't remember the exact. I learned everything I needed to know in kindergarten.
Kindergarten. That's a great
Yeah,
book.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
What's something about you that surprises people when they first hear it?
Then I'm a CPA.
Yeah. Yeah. I forgot about that. Fill in the blank. I spend too much money on.
Oh gosh, so many things. Oh, I don't know. I spend too
You don't
much
know.
money on.
Do you?
Um,
Are you a golfer, Ed?
yeah, but I don't spend a lot of money on it. Oh, what do I spend too much money on? I spend money on a lot of things. Um, and
Maybe just too
my
much.
wife might say,
Period.
yeah, I spend too much money. Let's say
Period.
that. Yeah. Well,
Same. I can be accused of that.
there's no roof racks on a hearse. I don't want to get,
Exactly.
I don't want to
Yes.
get, too dark here.
No, but you're right. And no, you're right. And Ed, you always create an awesome experience. I am so grateful for the relationship that we have. And I'm so grateful that you took some time today. I'm going to give homework assignment to everyone listening to think through the relational GPS for the folks in their life, business or personal, because it can be used for both. And then also thinking through what type of an experience you're creating for people with your interactions. How about that?
I love it. I love it. And I'm honored to be on your podcast. We'll do all the posting and all, and we'll get thousands and thousands of people wanting to listen to more uh, Laura Siebold podcasts. How's that?
Yes. Okay. Very good. And I'll make sure I have links to all of your contact information too, so people can follow you. But thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure.
All right. We'll
Great
talk
to
to
see
you
you.
soon. You too.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.